Showtime released their summer schedule for the next 5 months and show exactly why, when it comes to putting on the biggest and the best events in boxing, they really have no competition. We're going to talk about that on this video. Welcome back to the channel, people. I hope you're all doing well. Of course, it's your boy Budge here, and you are tuned into Talk to Budge. You're more than welcome, but before we proceed, you got to make sure you wipe your feet. And by that, I mean, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and sign up for all new notifications. So whenever a new video drops, you're always the first to find out about it and get a chance to watch it and listen to it, so on and so forth. Now, of course, as I always say, we are building this platform from the ground up. We're starting from scratch. And so in order to build the profile, in order to build the platform, I need you guys to support me. Honestly, it doesn't cost anything to hit that like button, to share it with your friends, your WhatsApp group chats, on Telegram, email threads at work, on your social media platforms, or whatever it is. Just share. Let's get the word spread of Talk to Budge. Ultimately, this platform was established for me to share my point of view on all of the topics that we discuss, but also for me to hear from you. This is supposed to be a two-way thing. It's supposed to be a dialogue, and you can give your point of view and your perspective in the comments. So make sure not only do you need to subscribe and hit the like button, but you also need to share your views as well, man. If you agree, if you disagree, if you've got a different opinion, then you're more than welcome to share that, man, and do so in the comments. Of course, this is called Talk to Budge for that reason, right? For you to talk to me. Now, that being said, like I said in the intro, this video is about the recent news that Showtime have released, which is basically the schedule of the summer months this year and all of the fights coming up. And essentially, it is action-packed from May all the way through to September in terms of world title fights, big names, pay-per-view events, and all the rest of it. And so what I want to do is really quickly go through some of the fights that they've got over this period of time, share my thoughts on each of them. Of course, there's quite a few, so I'm just gonna go through the schedule really quickly, and then I'll drop a few pointers or a few bits of my thoughts and stuff like that on some of the fights that are going to be happening. So they kick things off with Luis Nery versus Brandon Figueroa for the WBC Super Bantamweight title on May the 15th. Then they go into Nordine Ubali versus Nonito Donaire for the WBC Bantamweight title on May the 29th. I think that's a great fight. Of course, Nonito Donaire, we've seen him, you know, he's a tried and tested veteran now. We've seen him in there with some big names. We've seen him in there with Monster Inoue, Neo Inoue. We've seen him in there with Carl Frampton. We've seen him in there with Guillermo Rigondeaux. We've seen him in there with Ryan Burnett. He's been around the block, man. And so, again, it's just good to see that he is still fighting at the elite level for world titles after being in so many classic fights, essentially. You've got on June the 19th, Jamal Charlo, who, of course, is the WBC champion at 160 pounds at middleweight. He is fighting against Juan Montiel on June the 19th. So Charlo obviously goes into that fight with a record of 31-0, 22 wins coming by way of knockout. His last fight was, I'd say, probably his most stern test. So he, of course, had the doubleheader with his brother Jamal Charlo, and on that doubleheader, he fought against Sergey Derevyanchenko, and his brother Jamal Charlo fought against Jason Rosario for the unified title at 154 pounds. But that fight for Jamal Charlo was the best name on his resume in terms of stiff opponent in Sergey Derevyanchenko, who prior to that had fought and been in the ring with Triple G. and of course Danny Jacobs. Now, the fight against Triple G, even though Triple G got the nod, a lot of people, me included, felt that actually Sergey Derevyanchenko should have actually won that fight. So he is like a solid name, a solid opponent, and we saw that in the fight. He really gave Charlo hell. He had to really dig deep for that fight, for that win. So I'm sorry, but ultimately it was a great performance from Charlo. But the problem is, aside from Sergey Derevyanchenko, if you look at Jamal Charlo's resume, let's be honest, and let's call a spade, he doesn't have necessarily a strong resume and many names on his resume. For someone of his talent and someone of his level, you would expect for him to have better names on his resume, right? And aside from Derevyanchenko, I think the two other best names on his resume are fights that he fought back in 2016 when he fought against Austin Trout and Julian J. Rock Williams, right? Those are the other two big names in his resume. But between then, he's fought, he might have fought guys that have been ranked by certain governing bodies and so on and so forth. But he doesn't have a marquee name yet on his resume, and that's the issue. There's been so many big fights that have evaded him. You've got, of course, the fact that he has long been aggressively pursuing Canelo, and Canelo seems like he doesn't want to know. You've got the fact that he's been linked with Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade for whatever reason. That fight still hasn't yet materialized. He's been linked with Danny Jacobs. That fight still hasn't happened. I just think at this point in time, whilst it's great that he's staying active in fighting against Juan Montiel and the fact that he is, defending his title, it still is a bit of a lackluster opponent, if we're being honest. It's not a fight that you're eager for, you're looking forward for to seeing ultimately. I expect Jamal Charlo to come out victorious in that fight. Montiel has a record of 22-4, 22 knockouts. So he does seem to be a big puncher. All of the fights he's won by knockout. But he's lost 4 times. He's only been stopped once, and that was against Jaime Munguia. So, of course, people ultimately are going to be looking to see if Jamal Charlo can become only the second person to have stopped him. And so, ultimately, it looks like a decent opponent on paper, but still not a marquee name that you're going to want to wake up in the middle of the night to turn on the TV and watch. Ultimately, for us who obviously are here in the UK and have to wake up at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. to watch all of these US fights, it's not really that kind of fight that you're going to want to do that for. Let's see what happens in future. Hopefully we get to see a unification of some sorts. Of course, he's at 160, that being Jamal Charlo. He's got the WBC belt. Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade has struggled for opponents as well. He's, of course, fighting Liam Williams soon to defend his WBO belt. Can we see that unification? You still have Triple G, again, another person that Jamal Charlo has aggressively pursued, who has the IBF belt. We don't know who Triple G's fighting. We don't know where he is even. Can that fight happen? Let's wait and see. You've got Javonte Davies versus Mario Barrios for the WBA regular super lightweight title on June the 26th. And actually, of all of the fights on the Showtime schedule, this is the only fight that is pay-per-view. And to be fair, it deserves to be because of the fact that it's not only Gervonta Davis and Mario Barrios. Of course, we know Gervonta Davis is a pay-per-view star. He's the biggest attraction under 147 pounds, to be honest. He's the biggest name in the sport of boxing under 147 pounds. When he fights, particularly when there's fans that can be allowed, the big stars come out. He's a crossover fighter, so he gets all of the people within showbiz to come out. He gets all the rappers, he gets all of the models and so on and so forth. He's that guy, right? Ultimately. Now, the reason why that fight is a pay-per-view fight is because on the undercard, you have Erickson Lubin versus Jason Rosario. Now, let me break down both of those two fights, right? So let's start off with the headline, which is obviously Gervonta Davis versus Mario Barrio. So Gervonta Davis goes into that fight with a 24-0 record, 23 wins coming by way of knockout. And Mario Barrios goes into that fight 26-0, 17 wins coming by way of knockout. In terms of their last performances, it's really interesting, and you could see exactly what Showtime are trying to do. And they were very it's clear that they had always planned for this fight to be their next fight, because basically Mario Barrios fought, his last fight was fought on the undercard of Gervonta Davis, and that was the fight where Gervonta Davis knocked out Leo Santa Cruz, who of course is a freeweight world champion. He knocked him out in the 6th round. And Mario Barrios, on the undercard of that fight, also got a knockout in his fight against Ryan Carl. I can't remember what round it was, but he got a devastating knockout. And interestingly enough, his knockout in his last fight, his knockout of that opponent, led to there being a lot of rumors about him potentially fighting against Regis Prograis, who of course we know has a solid record and only got one loss on his resume, and that was in a unification fight against Josh Taylor, who is about to go in May and fight for undisputed against Jose Ramirez. So, I mean, this was definitely cooking. This was definitely a fight that that Showtime were planning on having. I think that fight between Regis Prograis and Mario Barrios absolutely is one that can happen in future, regardless of the outcome of this fight. I think that fight can still happen ultimately. But my stance and my take on this fight is that I'm not really happy with it, to be honest. Gervonta Davis's last fight was fought at 130 pounds when he fought against Leo Santa Cruz, right? And now he's moving up 2 weight divisions from 130 to go to 140 to fight against Mario Barrios. He predominantly has fought at 130 pounds. He went up 1 weight class to 135 pounds in lightweight for 1 fight, and that was when he fought against Yuriorkis Gamboa and stopped him in the 12th round. He then went back down to 130 pounds, and he was talking about the fact that he felt more comfortable at 130 pounds and that would be a more suitable weight class for him, only to then go and move up 2 weight classes now to fight against Mario Barrios. And ultimately, whilst I am more than happy to see fighters flexing their weight and daring to be great and moving in weight divisions and taking on challenges in new weight classes, my genuine opinion is you've got to finish your dinner first at your weight class. Like, I don't like seeing people moving up weight divisions and moving into different weight divisions before having dealt with all of the top opposition at your weight division. Particularly if, so in this case, right, Gervonta Davis is a 2-weight world champion, right, simultaneously. So he holds a belt at 130 pounds and he holds a belt at 135 pounds. The problem is he's moving up to fight Mario Barrios, and it's being billed as him going to become a 3-weight world champion, right? Because Mario Barrios has a title at 140. But the problem is, even if he's to win that fight, he only, in my view, he only holds 1 legitimate title, and that is at 130 pounds. He's a super WBA champion at 130 pounds. At 135 pounds and 140 pounds, those titles are secondary titles. And this is the problem that I have with these governing bodies and all of these different titles and how confusing they make things. Ultimately, it's because they want more sanctioning fees from more people having the belts. But the problem is that it causes confusion, particularly for fans of boxing that aren't like avid boxing fans and don't know the ins and outs of things. It's confusing. This person's got a belt, that person's a world champion, so on and so forth. It should really be simplified and the whole structure should be stripped back. But ultimately, like I said, more champions means more sanctioning fees for these governing bodies, means more money for them, ultimately. But at 135 pounds, the super champion, the actual champion for the WBA is Teofimo Lopez. Gervonta Tank Davis has the regular title, right? Which isn't the number one. It is like it's obviously the stage below. It's like an interim champion, right? And Mario Barrios has that same interim title, basically, that secondary title at 140 pounds. The real WBA champion at 140 pounds is Josh Taylor. He's obviously unified with the WBA and the IBF. And Mario Barrios has the secondary title. So, yeah, again, you can bill it as Javonte Davies daring to be great, becoming a freeweight world champion. But real boxing fans know that the titles at 140 and 135 pounds are secondary. And the real title that he has, the super championship that he has, is at 130 pounds. And if you look at that division, there's still fights on the table that you can have. You've got Oscar Valdez that just came off a sensational knockout win of Miguel Berchelt to win a WBC belt. You can fight him. You've got Jamel Herring as well, who's a WBO world champion at 130 pounds. You can fight him too. There's other fights for you to have within that division without you having to go and move up weight classes to fight against someone like a Mario Barrios. And when I think about it, it's huge risk for what you could potentially be getting out of it, because you're moving up 2 weight divisions. Of course, you're fighting a guy that is taller and that is bigger than you, and a guy that has punching power. So Tank is going to be giving up advantages in both the height and the reach department. Mario Barrios will have a 5-inch height advantage over him and a 4-inch reach advantage. So with that being said, I mean, all things considered, he is daring to be great. And in terms of the actual risk, it is a huge risk in the step up. But it's not one that I'm particularly pleased with, just because I feel like there's so much for him to do at 130 pounds. There's still so much for him to do at 135 pounds. There's Devin Haney to fight. There's Ryan Garcia. There's what's the guy's name? The guy that just fought against Teofimo Lopez. I don't know. His name evades me right now. I said Ryan Garcia. I said Devin Haney. Teofimo Lopez. You've got the Matrix. I can't remember. How can I forget the Matrix's name? Vasily Lomachenko. That's the one. You got Vasily Lomachenko that you still need to fight. Like, there's so much for you to do at both of those weight divisions before you then think about moving up and fighting at a higher weight class in 140 pounds. Anyway, that's my take on it. Erickson Lubin versus Jason Rosario, I think, is a great fight, and that's the reason why this card ultimately is pay-per-view, because those two are 2 fights that are brilliant, going to be action-packed fights. Both of them are like 4 fighters that are come forward, big punches and whatnot. So I think we're going to see knockouts with the Erickson Lubin and Jason Rosario fight. So Lubin comes into that fight with a 23-1 record, 16 wins coming by way of knockout. His only loss was that knockout against Jamal Charlo in the first round, where he ultimately made the step up, and it was just too early for him to fight against a fighter of the caliber of a Jamal Charlo. But he has solid names on his resume in that weight division. Prior to that fight against Jamal Charlo, he fought and beat Jorge Cota. And since that fight, since losing against Jamal Charlo, he's fought against and beat Nathaniel Gallimore, who is the first guy to have beat and stopped Jason Rosario, who he's obviously fighting next. And he's also beaten Terrell Goucher, whose only other loss, he's got 2 losses, one against Erickson Lubin. His only other loss is against Erislandy Lara. So, I mean, in terms of like opponents at 154 pounds, top opponents at 154 pounds, Erickson Lubin is cleaning up, to be completely honest. And he's gone from strength to strength after that fight against Jamal Charlo, and ultimately is trying to work his way back into contention for a world title fight. Now, Jason Rosario, he has a record of 20-2, 14 wins coming by way of knockout. Both of his losses are stoppage losses. One, like I said already, was to Nathaniel Gallimore, and the other one was to Jamal Charlo in his last fight, which is the fight that, he got stopped to the body. It was a very weird, it looked like a really strange punch to the body that knocked all the wind out of him. I think it was in the 8th round. And ultimately, off the back of that fight, Jamal Charlo became the unified world champion at 154 pounds with the WBC, WBA, and IBF world championships. So ultimately, this is a risky fight for Jason Rosario. Coming off that loss to Jamal Charlo, to get back in the ring with someone of the caliber of a Erickson Lubin, it is a huge risk, but also a huge risk on the part of Erickson Lubin, because he's trying to work himself back into title contention, and he's fighting against Jason Rosario, who, although has been stopped twice, is a very big puncher. And we saw him stop, prior to that fight against Jamal Charlo, we saw him stop Julian J. Rock Williams, who beat Jared Hurd for the titles before that. So it's like the man who beat the man who beat the man, ultimately. But yeah, great fight. Let's see that happen. Next fight, Chris Colbert versus Yuriorkis Gamboa for the WBA interim super featherweight title on July the 3rd. I mean, it's ultimately a step up fight for Chris Colbert, who really hasn't fought a top or kind of like big name opponent, right? So it's just a fight to see just how good he is, right? We've seen him against lesser opposition, and he's put in some great performances. His last performance was an absolutely great performance. Now it's a step up for him against a very wily, clever old veteran in Yuriorkis Gamboa. A fight that I expect him to win, ultimately, because Gamboa hasn't looked great in his last few fights. Father Time is catching up to him. He's getting on a little bit now. I think he's like 38 or 39 now. His last 2 fights were losses against Devin Haney, who outclassed him for 12 rounds. And prior to that, Javonte Tank Davis, who stopped him in the 12th round. So I expect Chris Colbert to come through the victor. I don't ultimately expect him to get a knockout because he's not the biggest puncher, but I do expect him to outclass him for 12 rounds, similar to what Devin Haney done against him in that fight. The biggest fight for me, the fight that I'm looking forward to most in this schedule, is the fight between Jamal Charlo and Brian Castano for Undisputed. Of course, like I said already, Jamal Charlo is the unified champion at 154 pounds. The only belt he doesn't have is a WBO, which is held currently by Brian Castano. I've done a video recently where I was talking about the fact that he took to social media to announce that the fight news was coming soon. That is Jamal Charlo. Lo and behold, about 24 hours later, the fight is announced and he is going to be fighting for Undisputed again. I expect him to come through that. I expect him possibly to win by stoppage. I think he is just the man at the moment at 154 pounds. I don't see anyone beating him. And yeah, I hope that once he does get all 4 belts, that he starts getting some respect put on his name and he starts getting mentioned in some of the pound for pound lists, which he should be, because he's fighting all comers. He doesn't duck any fades. He fights anyone and everyone in his weight division, and I think he should be getting some recognition for it. Next fight is Guillermo Rigondeaux versus John Rio Camero for the WBO bantamweight title on August the 14th. Ultimately, I'm just happy to see that Guillermo Rigondeaux is still active. I mean, at 40 years of age, the guy is still fighting world title fights, man. That, for me, is incredible. And hats off to him. He's had an illustrious career. Won gold medals at 2 different Olympic Games and gold medals at so many other championships, world championships and that kind of thing. And he was blackballed for a very long time, not being able to get big fights, get the big names. So many fighters we've seen avoided fighting him. And he had to move up ultimately 2 weight divisions to get a big name, was when he fought against Vasily Lomachenko. That ultimately was the only loss on his resume. But aside from that, he's had a stellar career so far, and I'm just happy to see that he's still getting these kind of world title fights and whatnot. So shout out to him. David Benavidez versus Jose Uzcategui, which is a WBC title eliminator, on August the 28th. David Benavidez goes into that fight with a record of 24-0, 21 wins coming through by way of knockout. And he is currently on a 4-fight knockout streak. So in his last 4 fights, he's knocked out Ronald Ellis, Roma Angulo, Anthony Durrell, and J. Leon Love. As Uzcategui goes into that fight with a record of 30-4, 25 wins coming by way of knockout. His last fight, however, was a stoppage win, but to a journeyman in a guy called Josue Obando, who has a record of 20-28. But we've seen Uzcategui in the ring with top-level opponents at 168 pounds. We've seen him in there with Andre Durrell. We've seen him in there with Caleb Plant as well. I mean, that was the fight against Caleb Plant was Caleb Plant's coming out party, basically. That was like he's announcing himself on the elite stage at 168 pounds. But ultimately, I just think he's a shade past his best now in Uzcategui. I think he's in the twilight of his career, and David Benavidez is on the ascendancy, right? Ultimately, he's getting better and better each fight, and I expect him to win this fight by stoppage. Like I said, he's on a four knockout streak at the moment in his last 4 fights, and I just think he's gonna have too much pressure. He's gonna walk down Uzcategui. He's going to have to fight on a back foot for that entire fight. I think he's going to wear him down with hellacious body shots, and I think he's going to win that fight by stoppage ultimately. And then finally, to wrap things up, apologies for the time of this video, I know it's a bit long, but we have Stephen Fulton, Cool Boy Steph, versus the winner of the first fight in the schedule, which is against Luis Neri and Omar Figueroa. That fight, like I said, is happening on May 15th. So on September the 11th, basically, Cool Boy Steph is going to fight the winner of Neri and Figueroa, which is great. It's what we like to see, the fact that there's forward planning. That fight would be a WBC and WBO unification. So Cool Boy Steph obviously has the WBO title. And ultimately, it's great to see that forward planning. So the winner already knows that they're going to be fighting against Cool Boy Steph, and Cool Boy Steph knows that he's going to fight that winner, so he can stay active. He's got a date in the calendar, so he knows what he's working towards, and ultimately, he's going to stay in the gym. He's not going to take any risks. He's not going to do anything to potentially jeopardize that potential unification. It's a big fight for him. But like I said, it's just great to see that they've got such a packed schedule in Showtime. Most of these fights are just going to be shown on regular TV. Only one being the pay-per-view fight, and that was the Javonte Davis and the Erickson Lubin doubleheader. So yeah, I mean, it's great to see. I wish that we saw stuff like this from other promotional entities and whatnot. It's just good to see, like, you can schedule so much around the calendar now that you've got sight of what's happening when, and so on and so forth. And that's what we want to see more of, man. The best fighting the best, title fights, title eliminators, big names against big names. And yeah, I mean, these are the kind of things that spoil us as boxing fans. This is what we want to see. But like I said, the main fight that I'm interested in is the Undisputed. It's the chance to get the first undisputed champion at 154 pounds at junior middleweight in the 4-belt era. So that is with the WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBA. So yeah, like that's great. It gives Jamal Charlo an opportunity to make history. Of course, whilst I don't completely approve of it, I'm definitely going to tune into and watch the Gervonta Davis and Mario Barrios fight. I think that's going to be a great fight, and that's going to be a great card. And all the rest of them are decent, man. They're all good as well. But anyway, let me know in the comments, what do you think? Out of that schedule, what are the fights that are whetting your appetite most? What are you most looking forward to? Let me know in the comments. Share your thoughts, share your views. Who have you got in each of these fights as well? Do you think potentially Gervonta Davis is biting off more than he can chew, moving up 2 weight divisions? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Another reminder, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, sign up to all notifications so you're always aware of when a new video drops. And I'm going to catch you guys on the next video. Budge, over and out.
Yeah.